On several occasions, I had the distinct honor of teaching some Christian Tarahumara indigenous Mexican Indians. They live primarily in the Sierra Madre Mountains of Mexico. My translator dearly loved his people and God. During one of my visits, there came an invitation to the home of a Tarahumaran family in a nearby village. Our drive there was one of the few times I have feared for my life in a vehicle. After several days of rain, the one-lane dirt road down to the village was several inches thick in slippery mud. There were no guardrails, just a steep hillside toward which the rear tires slid time and again. At the bottom of the hill, we wandered through the scattered dwellings in the village and up the hill on the opposite side. There we stopped at a small one-room house. A stovepipe protruded from its roof, and I could see the dimly lit room between the wood plank walls. Once inside, I saw about 10 Tarahumaran men and women seated around the perimeter of the room. Colorful shawls tightly wrapped around the women warmed them, even as a fire blazed in the stove made from a 50-gallon drum. One of the men greeted us and then took his place on a bench against one wall. They were ready. And I was asked to tell stories. They sat like stones, expressionless, and staring at the floor. They were there to hear stories about God and what He was doing around the world. For 2 hours, I told one story after another, with no response from any of them. Occasionally, one of the women would pull her shawl up over her eyes by a hidden hand. There were times that evening when most every woman sat with their faces covered by their shawls. Then one by one, they would pull the shawl down their faces, over their eyes, and return it under their chins. Blank faces. Silent. I learned later that they were so moved by the stories that they were crying. Since they rarely express emotion, they had hidden their faces from one another and from me. They wanted to hear everything about my experiences in China and were particularly moved by the suffering our Christian brothers and sisters endure. They wanted to hear about the squatters' camps in South Africa and orphans in Venezuela. And when I couldn't think of any more stories from first-hand experiences, my translator asked me to tell them about the miracles in George Mueller's orphan houses in Bristol, England. The entire experience was surreal. The firelight, the traditional clothing, the smells, and the silence, and the tears.